I knew it all along, you son of a and I'm finna beat your Don't play with me. I seen this with my own eyes, and I'm finna dust this. And I mean that, you been lying, ho. You a liar. And I'm finna beat you. Now, please don't hit on me. I'm gonna hit you. Don't
She ain't gonna answer me.
By the evening of November 16th, 2022, the unthinkable happened. Atlanta police walked into a scene that felt unreal even to seasoned officers. A young mother lay fatally wounded on the floor of the home she had fought so hard to build, and just a few feet away stood her youngest child, frozen in confusion. This was the final chapter of 29-year-old Cornisha Butler, a mother of 4 whose life was taken when the woman she once trusted raised a gun and pulled the trigger. She had finally spoken a truth she refused to keep hiding, and the person who claimed to love her chose violence instead. Security cameras later showed the chilling moment her wife stepped inside with the gun already in her hand, proof that this wasn't a sudden outburst, but a decision. Cornisha had done everything right, everything she knew to do, filing reports, begging for protection, stacking restraining orders like armor. But every door she knocked on moved too slowly. Every warning she gave was answered with paperwork instead of protection. And before anyone stepped in, her story had already reached its heartbreaking end. This wasn't some sudden outburst or heat-of-the-moment rage. This was a tragedy years in the making, built on silent bruises, ignored red flags, and all the chances no one took to save her. Cornisha's story unfolds in Atlanta, Georgia, a city bursting with culture and creativity, but drowning in a wave of rising violence in 2022. But her journey didn't start there. It began in Memphis, Tennessee, where she grew into a fiercely independent, magnetic woman who carried both ambition and motherhood with grace. She adored her 4 children, worked tirelessly, handling taxes by day, perfecting beauty as a licensed esthetician by night, and she pushed herself until she finally secured her dream, a beautiful 5-bedroom home where her babies could grow, breathe, and feel safe. Behind all the smiles she posted and the milestones she worked so hard for, a quiet storm had been building around her life for years. Back in 2016, when Cornisha first met Shakia Perkins, everything seemed sweet and effortless, those early days filled with charm, attention, and the kind of affection that feels like safety before you realize it's something else. But slowly, that affection twisted into something darker. Jealousy crept in, then control, then a kind of anger that never stayed contained. Arguments turned into full-on confrontations. What started as shouting morphed into attacks. Property she worked hard for was smashed without remorse. Threats didn't come once in a while, they poured in like clockwork. Fires were intentionally set. Cars were rammed with so much force they looked unrecognizable. Break-ins became a terrifying routine, and all the while, her phone filled with text messages detailing exactly what the abuser planned to do, each one a warning she hoped the system would finally take seriously. She went to the police again and again. She filed reports. She requested restraining orders. Officers made arrests. Yet every time, Shakia was released on bond as if the danger wasn't escalating right in front of them. 13 times she called for help. 13 times the threat was treated like another standalone moment instead of a pattern screaming to be stopped. And even through all the chaos, she kept trying to reclaim her peace. She moved forward with her life, buying a beautiful home where her children could finally feel safe. She decorated for the holidays, hanging lights and arranging her Thanksgiving plans with this hopeful energy she refused to let go of. She tried pulling away from the relationship, distancing herself, making decisions that were supposed to protect her and her babies. But danger wasn't fading. It was getting closer, inch by inch, like a shadow following her every move. On November 16th, 2022, the danger she had been trying to outrun showed up at her doorstep. Neighbors heard chaos spilling from inside her home as Cornisha and Shakia argued, one woman desperate to leave and the other refusing to let go. Then something in Shakia snapped. Instead of cooling off, she walked out to her car, pulled out a gun, and marched back inside with a decision already made. Her toddler was just a few steps away as she lifted the weapon. Seconds later, the neighborhood echoed with gunshots. When officers pulled up, they found the door open, a shaken neighbor waiting outside, and inside, 29-year-old Cornisha Butler on the living room floor, struck multiple times at close range while her holiday decor still glowed softly around her. First responders fought to save her, but the injuries were devastating, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Her toddler wasn't physically harmed, but the emotional scar of that moment would follow him, forever. Detectives knew instantly this wasn't random. This was personal, deliberate, and years in the making. The shell casings on the floor confirmed a 9mm, and officers moved quickly to pull every security camera angle they could find from surrounding homes. Neighbors described a suspicious car looping around the street earlier, like someone was waiting for the perfect moment. When police contacted the family, one name came up before they even finished the question: Shakia Perkins. And the deeper investigators dug, the more alarming the pattern became. Report after report showed her history. Domestic violence calls stretching back months, restraining orders filed, cars rammed and left crumpled, windows shattered, break-ins that left everyone shaken, and even arson cases tied to her. Each time she had been arrested, the same thing happened. Bond granted, danger released right back into the world. Detectives pulled phone records and saw her device pinging at Cornisha's home during the exact window of the shooting, and later at an apartment connected to her sister, matching the timeline perfectly. With every new piece of evidence, the picture sharpened, a slow, steady climb of obsession and violence that had finally erupted into a planned, intentional act. By 10:30 that night, officers had the entire apartment complex boxed in, convinced Shakia was inside trying to disappear into the shadows. The tactical team geared up, bracing for a standoff, expecting the same volatility she'd shown for years. But when the door finally swung open, there was no fight. She stepped out quietly, hands up, shifting between tears and a strange, detached calm that made the moment feel even more unsettling. Body cam footage later showed her whispering broken sentences, almost as if she was trying to rewrite what had happened, blaming everything except her own choices. Inside her car, officers found the 9mm still warm from use, a notebook filled with notes about Cornisha's habits and schedules, and an unsent message on her phone that froze investigators in their tracks. "It's done now. You can't leave me again." With that discovery, the manhunt ended, but the battle for accountability was only beginning, and the justice system was about to face the weight of everything it overlooked. When the trial opened, the courtroom was packed shoulder to shoulder, reporters setting up their cameras, activists holding notebooks, and community members sitting in silence, waiting to hear how something so preventable had ended in tragedy. Prosecutors wasted no time laying out the pattern that had been ignored for years: the smashed cars, the forced entries, the fires, the restraining orders that meant nothing, and the final act of violence that took Cornisha's life. Forensics confirmed the gun recovered from Shakia's car matched the shell casings left on the living room floor, and cell tower data placed her exactly where she denied being. The text messages she sent, the ones she never sent, and the ones she threatened with all told the same story: intent, obsession, and a refusal to let Cornisha walk away. Neighbors described the morning she said she feared her partner would eventually kill her, and friends recounted the chaos they'd witnessed over the years. Then came the most emotional moments: victim impact statements from her children, innocent voices describing holidays now ruined and birthdays missing the person who made them feel safe. The defense tried to argue emotional instability, but the jury saw the planning, the build-up, the choice. It took only hours before they returned with their decision: guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of firearm possession during a felony, and guilty of cruelty to children. And with that, the judge handed down the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Look closely. For the first time, we're seeing video of a woman retrieving a gun moments before she murdered her wife. She's now pleaded guilty to the crime, and Channel 2 investigative reporter Mark Winnie is live in Midtown Atlanta. Mark, there were allegations of domestic violence before the murder, but that suspect got out on bond.
Yeah, a prosecutor with the Fulton County DA's Domestic Violence Division says while the video shows getting the gun moments before this murder, his experience looking at abusive relationships shows how often victims sadly stay in or return to a relationship even as the violence escalates.
In the Perkins case, it is a wife who kills her wife. There had been escalating violence.
In November 2022, Shakia Perkins shot out of the house she shared with her wife, Cornisha Perkins, stalked to her car, and came back with a gun in her left hand. Then Shakia shot Cornisha in the head, and says Fulton County Senior Assistant District Attorney Travis Thomas.
Pretty soon after we showed that video, she decided to take the plea.
He says last month Shakia Perkins pled guilty to murder and more.
She ultimately pled to life with the possibility of parole. That was a plea deal that was offered. So she admitted everything.
Thomas says though they shared the bond of matrimony on the day of the murder, Shakia Perkins should not have been near her wife because Shakia was out on bond totaling $70,000 on charges of aggravated assault, criminal damage to property, terroristic threats, felony, and arson first degree. Conditions including must not come within 200 yards of the victim in those alleged incidents, which was Cornisha.
She tried to run Cornisha off the road in her car, and this all happened within months of this incident. Also, there was an incident where she set Cornisha's car, she had a Jeep, set her car on fire in the driveway.
Thomas says in the vehicle arson, a person believed to be Shakia Perkins can be seen on doorbell video in the vicinity of the fire.
For the community, the guilty verdict felt like a weight lifted. But it didn't bring the kind of peace people prayed for. Candlelit vigils spread across Atlanta and South Fulton. Friends gathered with photos and flowers, and balloons floated into the night sky, carrying messages of love for a woman who should still be here. Social media overflowed with memories of her laughter, her drive, the way she worked so hard for her kids, and how she kept showing up even when life kept knocking her down. But underneath all the mourning was a sharp, steady anger at a system that watched her ask for help over a dozen times and still let danger walk right back to her door. Police leaders eventually admitted Shakia had been charged repeatedly for domestic violence, yet each time she was released on bond as if the threat wasn't growing louder. Advocates began pushing harder than ever for reform, using Cornisha's story as a heartbreaking reminder that victims don't just fall through cracks, they're often left standing there alone. And as the community tried to heal, the questions grew louder. How many warnings have to be ignored before someone steps in? How many victims are still living in fear right now? Who will fight for them before tragedy strikes? What signs do we miss when someone is trying to quietly survive? And finally, if you see something, if you hear something, if you feel something isn't right, will you speak up, or will silence win again? At her funeral, the sanctuary was filled beyond capacity, every seat taken by people who loved her, people who wished they could have done more, and people who came simply to stand with her children in their darkest moment. Her babies, dressed in soft white, sat quietly in the front row, surrounded by family who promised to guard them for the rest of their lives. Pastors spoke gently about her strength, her ambition, the joy she carried, and the way she pushed through every obstacle with her children at the center of everything she did. But when the final prayer ended and the room fell into that heavy silence, one question lingered in every heart. How could this have been stopped? Cornisha did everything she was supposed to do. She reported the abuse, she documented the threats, she begged for help, she tried to break free. And still, she was left alone with a danger she should never have had to face. Her story now stands as both a warning and a responsibility, a reminder that domestic violence is never just a moment. It is a repeated cycle that grows stronger every time someone ignores it. and a call to all of us to listen closer, intervene sooner, and demand systems that protect victims before tragedy steals another life. Silence is never harmless, and inaction has consequences. Thank you so much for watching, my wonderful audience. Please like this video, drop a comment, share, and make sure you subscribe to Viral Crime Stories if you haven't already.